From criminals who cried, yelled, and screamed in court when their sentence was read, to those who said they would do it all over again, here are the top 20 biggest convict explosions of all time. Number 20. Deobra DeLone Redden. Deobra DeLone Redden stood in front of Judge Mary Kay Holthus, asking her for leniency. He was brought to court on 9 felony charges that included armed battery, robbery, and attempted unaliving. This was not Deobra's first time in court. The man already had an extensive criminal record. However, Deobra and his lawyers claimed that he was mentally ill and therefore not in control of his actions. He pleaded the same defense in front of the judge, who was not sympathetic. Instead of granting him probation like he was asking, the judge leaned more toward a prison sentence, a lengthy one at that. She had not finished her sentence just yet when Deobra ran from across the courtroom and leapt over the judge's desk, attacking Mary Kay. She claimed that he tackled her to the ground, pushed her against a wall, and pulled her hair right before the bailiffs came and took Deobra away. According to witnesses, Deobra was attempting to unalive her, a claim Deobra and his lawyers later tried to deny when he was charged with attacking the judge. This incident was back in January 2024. A year later, Deobra stood in court again for charges against the judge. While his original sentence guaranteed him a reasonable release time, things were much different in 2025. Deobra was brought in court in handcuffs with a mesh covering over his face. He pleaded that he had suffered a psychotic break and was not an evil person. The courtroom was less than sympathetic, while his lawyers claimed that he was suffering from schizophrenia. For his crime against the judge, Deobra was sentenced to 26 years in prison. 31-year-old Deobra DeLone Redden will be released sometime in the 2050s. Number 19. Amanda Cook. In 2019, 41-year-old Amanda Cook was charged with the second-degree unaliving of her elderly roommate, 64-year-old Karen Leahy. The roommates had gotten into an argument, things turned violent, and Amanda attacked Karen with a cast-iron microphone stand, unaliving her. She then drove to her mother's home, who convinced her to come back and check on Karen. They returned to find that Karen had already passed away, and Amanda's mother called emergency services. While she initially denied unaliving Karen, claiming her roommate had simply fallen over, but the coroner's report showed that she had been attacked, comparable to being hit by a car. The crime shocked people in North Naples, Florida, but something more shocking was yet to come. In 2026, Amanda was back in court, facing charges of second-degree unaliving. As the courtroom heard the horrific details of her crime, Amanda was seen whispering to herself. She then loudly started claiming that the courtroom was actually Satan's synagogue. This continued for a while before she started loudly yelling and screaming in court. Amanda had to be removed from the courtroom. Her erratic behavior concerned everyone in the courtroom, but it did not deter the judge's decision, and sentencing continued without her presence. Amanda Cook was sentenced to life in prison. Number 18. Jeremy Christian. The Portland stabbing case was one of the most shocking incidents of 2017. At the heart of it was Jeremy Christian, a far-right extremist who boarded the train that day, hoping to start a fight. He started targeting 2 Muslim girls, yelling racial slurs at them. 3 men, Taliesin Namkai Meke, Ricky John Best, and Micah Fletcher, stepped in to defend the girls. In the ensuing argument, things started getting physical, and Jeremy pulled out a knife. He unalived 2 of the men and seriously injured the 3rd. He was arrested soon after and faced charges of hate speech, carrying a weapon, and, of course, unaliving. The case was sensational because of rising Islamophobia in the United States, but Jeremy's courtroom behavior made the case even more controversial. He claimed that he did nothing wrong, referring to himself as a patriot and claiming that he was the only one who was actually trying to save the United States. Jeremy entered the courtroom in restraints, but that did not stop him from immediately taking control of the atmosphere. As the hearing began, he started shouting loudly, interrupting both the judge and the prosecution. Instead of addressing the court in a typical way, he launched into aggressive and chaotic rants, repeating phrases and slogans tied to his extremist beliefs. His voice was raised almost constantly, making it difficult for anyone else in the room to speak. As victims' families began giving impact statements, Jeremy's behavior became even more disturbing. At times, he laughed. The judge had to pause multiple times to regain order, but Jeremy continued interrupting, forcing the court to repeatedly warn him. At one point, the judge directly addressed him and made it clear that the behavior would not be tolerated. but even that did not fully stop the outbursts. Jeremy's tone shifted between anger, defiance, and what many described as performative theatrics. He was sentenced to life in prison. Number 17. Ali Abulaban. Ali Abulaban was a social media personality known online as Jinn Kid, where he gained a following for his impressions and comedy videos. In October 2021, his life took a violent turn. At the time, Ali was separated from his wife, Anna Abulaban, and there were ongoing issues in their relationship, including reports of jealousy and controlling behavior. According to prosecutors, Ali installed a listening app on his daughter's iPad to secretly monitor conversations inside the apartment. Through that, he believed his wife was with another man, Rayburn Barron. He then went to the apartment, forced his way inside, and shot both Anna and Rayburn, unaliving them. He was arrested shortly after and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. During the trial, evidence, including recordings, messages, and prior threats, painted a clear picture of premeditation. In 2024, he was found guilty. What really stood out about Ali's case was the fact that he tried to act as if he was grieving just as much as anyone else. He claimed that he loved his wife and that whatever he did was a crime of passion, carrying a lesser charge. Ali also claimed that he came from a toxic family situation and did not know any better. He asked the court for leniency, but it was hard to believe that he was remorseful, especially when he started arguing with Anna's friends and family members in court when they called him a narcissist. Number 16. Maxim Gelman. From February 11th to 12th of 2011, Maxim Gelman carried out a 28-hour stabbing across New York City. The incident left 4 people unalived and 5 others wounded. But who was Maxim? In 1994, Maxim and his family immigrated from Ukraine to the United States. His father later returned to Ukraine, where he was reportedly unalived. Maxim was largely unpopular growing up. Many of his peers viewed him as an outcast and a troublemaker. He was known for skateboarding and being a graffiti artist around the area, and had already gained a reputation with law enforcement. Besides getting in trouble for spray painting on public property, Maxim was also found with illegal substances, both for his use and to sell. By 2011, he was an unliked, antisocial outcast with a criminal record. The incident started at 5 in the morning when Maxim woke up his mother. He had grown increasingly paranoid and believed that the DEA was after him and he needed to flee to the Dominican Republic. His mother argued with him, believing he was drunk, and this woke up his stepfather, who started cursing at him. Maxim grabbed a kitchen knife and began stabbing his stepfather repeatedly. Altogether, he was stabbed 55 times. According to the criminal, once he had unalived his stepfather, he knew he would be caught and sent to prison. This meant that it was inevitable, and he could carry out as many attacks as he wanted to. Maxim stole his stepfather's vehicle and went to a female acquaintance's house, where he unalived her mother and then waited for her. He then unalived the daughter before unaliving a driver and carjacking his vehicle. He also ran over a crossing guard, breaking her leg, and another pedestrian, who later passed away from his injuries. Maxim was arrested only after another one of his potential victims tackled him to the ground and disarmed him. The case was sensational, mostly because Maxim had no reason to unalive as many people as he did besides the fact that he wanted to. What generated even more headlines, however, was the fact that he was not remorseful for his actions. His behavior was described as unruly in court. He was laughing, making fun of the victims and their families, and claimed he would do it all over again if he could. The judge called him a sociopath and sentenced him to life in prison. Number 15. Ciandel Jackson. Deputies had to restrain and pepper spray 19-year-old Ciandel Jackson as he erupted in court after the judge announced his sentence: life in prison with no chance of parole. Ciandel was sentenced to a lifetime behind bars for the attempted robbery and unaliving of 21-year-old film student from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Nathan Potter. Nathan was on his way back to his apartment when he was approached by Ciandel and an accomplice. The 2 men stabbed Nathan, unaliving him, and then attempted to rob him. In court, the prosecutors claimed that Nathan did not have any money on him, and the 2 men had unalived him in vain. The judge also heard another case involving Ciandel and the non-fatal shooting of another man that same day in 2009. The courtroom was emotional as Ciandel's case was tried in 2010. Nathan's family members wept and called Ciandel a monster for what he had done to the aspiring young man. But instead of showing any remorse whatsoever, Ciandel acted like the case was a joke. He laughed, yelled over testimonies, and acted as defiant as he possibly could. This, obviously, hindered his defense. The defense attorney asked the judge for leniency, stating Siandel's young age and rough upbringing. However, he had gotten so disruptive that the sheriffs had to pepper spray him and pull him out of the courtroom. The judge, while coughing through the fumes, announced that the decision would be upheld and that Siandel would never see the light of day again. Number 14. Slobodan Praljak. Slobodan Praljak was a Bosnian Croat general who became one of the key figures prosecuted after the Bosnian War in the 1990s. Before the war, he had a completely different life. He was educated in engineering, philosophy, and even worked in theater and film. But during the conflict, he rose through the ranks of the Croatian Defense Council and was later accused of being part of a campaign against Bosnian Muslims. Prosecutors argued that he played a role in operations that involved the destruction of civilian areas, forced displacement, and attacks on non-combatants. One of the most symbolic events tied to the broader case was the destruction of the historic Mostar Bridge. Years later, he was indicted and put on trial by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. In 2013, Slobodan was found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity and sentenced to 20 years in prison. But he did not accept the ruling. He appealed the decision, which led to a final hearing in November 2017 in The Hague. By that point, he was 72 years old. The judge upheld his conviction and confirmed the 20-year sentence. The second it became clear that the sentence would not change, he declared that he was not a war criminal and that he rejected the court's judgment. What happened next is what turned the case into one of the most shocking courtroom moments ever recorded. Slobodan reached into his pocket, pulled out a small brown bottle, and raised it to his lips. Before anyone in the courtroom could react, he drank from it. Then, he calmly stated that he had just taken poison. The judge halted proceedings and called for medical assistance. Slobodan began to show signs of distress as the poison took effect. Emergency responders arrived quickly, and he was transported to a hospital. Number 13. Christopher Watts. In August 2018, Christopher unalived his pregnant wife, Shanann Watts, and their two young daughters, Bella and Celeste. At first, he reported them missing and even appeared on news interviews asking for their safe return. But as investigators began looking deeper, his story quickly started to fall apart. Police soon discovered inconsistencies in his statements, along with surveillance footage showing him loading his truck early in the morning. Within days, Christopher confessed to the killings. He later admitted that he had strangled his wife and then unalived his daughters, disposing of their bodies at an oil site where he worked. During sentencing, what stood out was not an explosive reaction but the complete lack of one. Christopher remained calm, quiet, and almost emotionless as the details of his actions were read out in court. Even as family members gave emotional statements, he showed very little visible response. He was sentenced to multiple life terms without parole. Number 12. Andrew Kevin Gollan. Andrew Kevin Gollan was a young man from South Australia whose case gained attention after a violent and completely unprovoked rampage in early 2024. At the time, he was in his mid-20s and already had a troubled background, with reports of substance abuse, mental health issues, and a history of instability. But what really brought his name into the spotlight was what happened on January 23, 2024, at Christie's Beach in Adelaide. That day, Andrew approached a random vehicle near the Christie's Beach Hotel and, without warning, smashed the car window using a scooter. When the 63-year-old driver stepped out, Andrew escalated things even further. He struck the man in the head with the same scooter, causing serious injuries, including a fractured skull, cuts, and long-term physical damage. The attack was described as completely unprovoked, but it didn't stop there. When police arrived to arrest him, Andrew turned his aggression toward them as well. Bodycam footage later showed him resisting arrest, punching officers, and even swinging the scooter at them. One officer suffered a broken nose after being punched multiple times, while another was also struck during the struggle. Andrew later pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including assault, resisting police, causing harm, and property damage. Given the severity of the attack and the evidence against him, including CCTV and bodycam footage, the case itself was already strong. But like a lot of cases on this list, what happened in court is what really made it stand out. During his sentencing hearings in 2025, Andrew appeared via video link from custody. And almost immediately, things started going off the rails. As prosecutors began presenting their case, he started interrupting, swearing, and shouting over everyone in the courtroom. At one point, he refused to even listen to the proceedings, repeatedly yelling that he wanted to be sent back to his cell. He began punching the screen, throwing objects around the room, and continuing to shout even after his audio had been muted. Andrew then made a hand gesture shaped like a weapon and pointed it directly at the judge during the hearing. He was ultimately sentenced to 9 years in prison for his actions. Number 11. Jodi Arias. Jodi Arias wept in court, claiming she was a battered woman, the victim of her ex-boyfriend's torture. Jodi had been in an explosive relationship with Travis Alexander. Their on and off relationship went on for years, with many friends telling Travis that Jodi was on edge. Things eventually came ahead in 2008 when Travis's roommates came home to find that he had been unalived. Jodi, meanwhile, claimed she was in a different state. Police later found that she had spent the night with Travis, unalived him in the morning, and then made the long journey back home from Arizona to California. While Jodi initially denied having anything to do with Travis's unaliving, she later changed her story, claiming that he had been harming her. The defense team painted her as a battered woman, and the prosecution claimed that nothing could have been further from the truth. They claimed that Jodi and Travis had an argument in the morning after Travis revealed that he would not be rekindling their romance after all. Jodi also learned that he was seeing someone new. At that point, the prosecution claimed that Jodi started stabbing him multiple times. She even took pictures of the crime scene before she left. Jodi tried to portray herself as a victim in court, but the expert psychologist witness called it an act. In the end, with the judge and jury unmoved by her show, she was sentenced to life in prison. Number 10. Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari. Family members and neighbors had repeatedly made calls to Child Protective Services, alleging that a couple in Kent County, Michigan, had been severely mistreating their 10-month-old daughter. The child, Mary Welch, was barely seen outside of the home. Child Protective Services became involved in Mary's case almost immediately after she was born. Mary was born severely underweight, weighing slightly over a pound, and had illegal substances in her system. Her parents appeared intoxicated at the hospital, and the staff alerted CPS. However, follow-ups with the family were sporadic. Many claim that had the authorities actually checked in on Mary during that time, they would have found the living conditions to be extremely filthy and unfit for a child. In court, the couple claimed that they did not take Mary to a doctor because of religious reasons. Their defense argued poverty and lack of stability in their personal lives for the maltreatment of their daughter. However, the judge believed the crime was intentional and sentenced both to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Seth and Tatiana cried out in shock as their sentence was read. The couple claimed they were being unfairly treated and that they loved their children. However, Child Protective Services carried out a separate trial against the parents, seeking to terminate their parental rights completely. In a last-ditch attempt at a lighter sentence, Tatiana claimed that she had tried to get Mary to a hospital, but that Seth would never permit her. She flipped the entire case on him and claimed that he had been harming her as well. The prosecutors were unmoved by her testimony and claimed that she was only sorry she was caught. The judge did not change her sentence. Number 9. Paul Senecal. In 2022, Paul Senecal stabbed and unalived 29-year-old Melanie Chianese, the daughter of his former girlfriend, Cheryl Chianese. Earlier, Paul had been arrested and charged with at least 7 different cases of domestic harm against Cheryl. One of the witnesses who testified in the case against Paul was Melanie. She lived with her mother and 3-year-old son at the Dutchess County residence, where most of the crimes against her mother were committed. Allegedly, Paul believed that Melanie had intervened in his relationship, which led to them breaking up. While he was tried and charged for his domestic cases, Paul was out on bail and wearing an ankle monitor at the time of the attack. He allegedly stalked Melanie and then chased her as she tried to run to the home. The incident was captured on ring camera footage that showed Melanie desperately trying to get into the home while covering a stab wound on her neck. Melanie did not make it inside the home in time, and Paul approached her, stabbing her several more times before she was eventually unalived. He later fled the scene and was captured a day later after an extensive manhunt. During his 2023 trial, he wept in court and claimed that the crime was not really committed by him. He blamed the devil and claimed that he had been hearing voices. However, Cheryl claimed that he had promised to unalive her and her daughter after the former couple broke up. She was granted a 99-year restraining order against Paul, and Paul was sentenced to life in prison for the crime. Perhaps the most emotional aspect of the case was when Cheryl testified that one of Melanie's dreams was to hear her autistic son say, "Mom," for the first time. Number 8. Nicolas Cruz. Nicolas Cruz was a 19-year-old former student who carried out one of the worst school shootings in United States history. On February 14, 2018, Nicholas walked into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, armed with a semi-automatic weapon. It only took a few minutes, and Nicholas had unalived 14 students and 3 staff members, while injuring 17 others. He was arrested shortly after. The case was one of the most high-profile trials in the country. In 2021, Nicholas pleaded guilty to all counts. The jury had to decide whether he would receive the ultimate penalty or life in prison without parole. Nicholas was strangely disconnected during sentencing, and his behavior was weird throughout the entire process. He sat completely still, barely reacting, even as families spoke directly to him about what he had done and all the lives he had cost. He was seen whispering to his attorneys and occasionally smiling at inappropriate times. The jury chose life in prison without parole. Nicholas remained quiet. Just silence. Number 7. Darrell Brooks. The city of Waukesha, Wisconsin was excited for the annual Christmas parade in 2021. The city would host a large parade, which had been celebrated every year except 2020 during the pandemic. The crowd, therefore, at the 2021 parade was larger than ever before. That day, on the November 21st parade, Darrell Brooks was released on bail for the November 2nd domestic charge against his ex-girlfriend, where he punched her in the mouth. Darrell had an extensive criminal history that went as far back as 1999. According to his grandmother, he was severely mentally ill and suffering from bipolar personality disorder. That might have been true, but it did not justify his actions at the Waukesha Christmas Day parade. Darrell rammed through the crowd in a maroon Ford Escape, unaliving 6 people, 5 of whom were part of an elderly singing and dancing troupe, and a young toddler, and injuring close to 60 others. According to officers, he drove in a zigzag manner, ensuring as many people got hit as possible. He then fled the scene and took shelter at a random man's house, claiming that he was homeless and needed to use the phone. The man did not know who he was or the horrific crime that he had just committed. Darrell was arrested on the spot and taken into custody. It was the worst mass unaliving in Waukesha's history. What should have been a day of celebration turned into a day of grieving. But what stood out even more was how Darrell responded to the charges. In an interview, Darrell claimed that he was being treated unfairly and that he was not the demon that the media was portraying him as. His defense team argued insanity, stating that Darrell was mentally ill, but had never received proper medical care because the family did not have medical insurance. Darrell was also incredibly disruptive during his court appearances. He repeatedly yelled and backtalked the judge, to the point that the judge refused to allow Darrell to call any other witnesses forward. Darrell had a weak case already, and his disruptions in court did not help. He was ultimately sentenced to life in prison. Number 6. Luca Magnotta. Luca Magnotta was a Canadian man whose case became globally known because of how public and disturbing it was. In May 2012, Luca unalived Jun Lin, an international student in Montreal. What made the crime especially shocking was that Luca recorded parts of it and uploaded the video online, which quickly spread and triggered an international manhunt. After the crime, he fled Canada and traveled across Europe using fake identities before being arrested in Berlin at an internet cafe. His case drew massive media attention, not just because of the brutality, but because of how much of it played out online. During his trial in 2014, Luca admitted to the acts, but claimed he was not criminally responsible due to mental illness. The court ultimately rejected that defense, finding him guilty of first-degree murder and other charges. At times, he appeared calm and detached, but there were also moments where he became emotional, crying, or complaining about how the trial was affecting him. Some observers felt his reactions were inconsistent and attention-seeking. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. Number 5. Dalia Dippolito. Dalia Dippolito was a woman from Florida who became widely known after being caught in a police sting for trying to have her husband unalived. In 2009, she contacted someone she believed was a hitman, but that person was actually working with the police. From that point on, everything she said and did was recorded. She discussed the plan clearly and even handed over money for the job. Police then set up a fake crime scene and went to her home to tell her that her husband had been unalived. Her reaction is what made the case go viral. She started crying loudly, screaming, and collapsing on the floor. At first, it looked like a normal emotional reaction, but many people later felt it seemed exaggerated or staged. That video spread everywhere online and became one of the most talked about moments in true crime. Her case went through multiple trials. She was first convicted in 2011, but that verdict was overturned. A second trial ended without a decision. Finally, in 2017, she was convicted of trying to hire someone to unalive her husband. At her sentencing, her reaction once again became a major moment. As the judge announced her 16-year prison sentence, she broke down crying. She said she was innocent and claimed she had been set up. Her voice was loud and emotional, and she tried to speak directly to the courtroom, hoping someone would believe her. What made her case stand out wasn't just the crime, but how she reacted. From the fake crime scene to her sentencing, her emotions always seemed intense and dramatic. Some people believed she was genuinely upset, while others felt she was performing. That uncertainty is what made her case so widely discussed and memorable. Number 4. Donna Adelson. In 2014, Dan Merkel was involved in a bitter and lengthy custody battle with his ex-wife, Wendy Adelson. Wendy claimed that Dan was being vindictive, refusing to allow the kids to relocate with her to another state. Dan maintained that he wanted the kids to stay close to him. He further petitioned the judge to keep the kids away from their maternal grandmother, Donna Adelson. Dan had a contentious relationship with Wendy's family, even while they were married. Things escalated after the divorce, and became even worse when he refused to allow his kids to be alone in Donna's care. According to friends and family members, Donna vowed to take revenge. In July 2014, Dan was attacked outside of his home, shot and unalived, and the unaliver escaped the scene. The case went cold for 2 years until officers announced that they had 2 possible suspects, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. While Donna was a person of interest during the case, she had a solid alibi. Investigators later learned that she had, in fact, been in contact with the 2 men who were responsible for Dan's unaliving. During questioning, both men pointed toward a woman, Catherine Magbanua. Catherine was related to Garcia and Charlie Adelson, Wendy's brother and Donna's son. Catherine was brought into questioning, and she alleged that Charlie had given her a large sum of money, almost $25,000, to find people who would commit the unaliving for them. Charlie and Donna were not initially arrested, and both denied any involvement in the crime. The men who had actually fired the weapon were tried and sentenced to life without parole in 2019. In 2022, Catherine was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Donna and Charlie were eventually arrested in 2022 during a wiretap confession, and their trials formally began in 2023. Again, both of them denied any involvement in the crime, but the evidence against them was overwhelming, and a judge believed that the Adelsons had plotted to unalive Dan and allow Wendy full custody of the children. Donna's trial was delayed over and over again by her lawyers, who tried every tactic to get her off with as little prison time as possible. But this only irked the judge, who, in 2024, charged Donna with the intentional unaliving for-hire plot and sentenced her to life in prison. Donna's reaction to the sentencing was intense. She wept in court, pretended to faint, and cried out that she was being unfairly tried when she had nothing to do with her former son-in-law's unaliving. The judge was unmoved and upheld his decision. Number 3. Charles Manson. Charles Manson was not just a criminal, he was the leader of a cult known as the Manson family, a group of followers he had manipulated into carrying out one of the most infamous unaliving sprees in American history. In August 1969, members of his group carried out a series of coordinated attacks across Los Angeles, unaliving 9 people, including actress Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time. Even though Charles did not physically commit the attacks himself, prosecutors argued that he orchestrated everything, pushing his followers to commit the crimes as part of a larger, almost delusional vision of a race war he called Helter Skelter. By the time his trial began in 1970, the case had already become a media spectacle. But what made it even more chaotic was Charles himself. From the very start, his behavior in court was unpredictable. He carved an X into his own forehead and claimed it symbolized that he had removed himself from society. His followers mirrored this behavior, sitting in court with the same mark. As the trial went on, things only got worse. Charles constantly disrupted proceedings, filed bizarre motions, and spoke in ways that made very little sense. At one point, he was even allowed to act as his own attorney, but that privilege was taken away because of how chaotic and nonsensical his behavior became. During the trial, Charles was denied permission to question a witness. Instead of accepting the judge's decision, he leapt over the defense table and rushed toward the judge in an attempted attack. Bailiffs tackled him before he could reach the judge and forced him to the ground. At the same time, his followers in the courtroom stood up and began chanting loudly, adding to the chaos. After that incident, security around the trial was tightened significantly. Reports even stated that the judge began wearing a concealed weapon under his robes, which tells you just how serious the situation had become. In 1971, Charles Manson was convicted of multiple counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy, and was sentenced to capital punishment, a sentence that was later commuted to life in prison. Number 2. Luis Bracamontes. In October 2014, Luis Bracamontes unalived 2 police officers for no apparent reason other than the fact that he simply wanted to. Luis had illegally entered the United States 3 times, once in the 90s, once in the early 2000s, and once around the time of the shooting. He was arrested and deported the first 2 times for possessing and selling illegal substances. Luis was accompanied by Janelle Monroy, a citizen of the United States from Utah. Together, the 2 of them first unalived a sheriff's deputy in the Sacramento metropolitan area, unsuccessfully tried to unalive a civilian, carjacked a vehicle, and then shot at 2 deputies, one of whom was unalived. An extensive manhunt led to their arrests, but the actual court case was delayed for about 4 years. During each one of Luis's hearings, he would start yelling and screaming in court. His outbursts meant that the case had to be recalled several times. As the court prepared to deliver the final sentence, Luis began laughing loudly and speaking out of turn. His tone was casual, almost mocking, which made the situation deeply uncomfortable, given the presence of the victims' families in the room. At one point, he openly admitted to the crimes again, but instead of showing regret, he framed it in a disturbing way. He said he wished he had unalived more officers. For his crimes, Luis was sentenced to life in prison in 2018. Janelle was sentenced to 50 years. Number 1. Ezra McCandless. Ezra was a woman scorned when Alex Woodworth broke off their relationship. On March 22, 2018, Ezra saw Alex at a coffee shop and was immediately agitated. She told Alex that she would be returning to his home later that evening to return a few of his belongings. Other patrons at the coffee shop also noted that Ezra seemed unruly and agitated. Jason Mengel, a friend of the former couple, was concerned because, as he claimed, Ezra was not acting like herself that day. He followed them to Alex's home, waited outside, and even talked to the police who asked him about the situation. The police and Jason knocked on the door and had a conversation with the former couple, both of whom assured everyone that everything was all right. The police and Jason then left. What happened next, however, keeps Jason up at night. 3 hours after everyone had left, Ezra knocked on a dairy farmer's home. She was seen on ring camera footage, barefoot, bruised, and covered in mud. She claimed that she could not remember anything and that she had been a victim. At the hospital, she asked for Jason. When asked about Alex's whereabouts, she claimed she could not remember. A day later, police found Alex's body hanging off the back of Ezra's Chevy Impala. What made this case even more interesting was that Ezra claimed she could not remember anything, but then started changing her story every time she was asked. During interrogation, she claimed that Alex had carved the word "boy" in her forearm during the attack. She later admitted she had done that herself. She also claimed that she never stabbed Alex, but he was found with 16 stab wounds. The defense claimed that Alex tried to force himself on Ezra after she told him that she would not be rekindling their romance. However, the prosecution pointed out that after stabbing Alex 16 times, Ezra then took his phone. This pointed out that she had deliberately carried out the attack and made sure that no one could trace him. Ezra cried loudly as her sentence, life in prison, was read, and her family appealed the decision, claiming that parole after 20 years was reasonable. The judge, however, believed that Ezra had premeditated the attack and was now trying to evade justice. Her original sentence was upheld.